Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche organization with your daily video update for September 15th, 2023, or as some might call it, the Ides of September. Yesterday, I mentioned at the end of the update that I'd be talking about what President Putin said at the Eastern Economic Forum in Vladivostok, and I'll take that up today because I think it's crucial that people get an actual picture of what the president of Russia is saying, which you're not getting from the media. Putin offered some insight into his thinking during a 3-hour question and answer session at the end of the Eastern Economic Forum. The only reporting in the West on this event was narrowly focused on what he said about new physical principles in military technology, and at the same time speculation, mostly completely uninformed, about the meeting between Putin and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. And while we're still told that he's an evil man bent on conquering Europe to rebuild the Soviet Empire with delusions that he's a new Peter the Great, his discussion showed why all the Western media have been wrong in their assessments of the Russian economy. These assessments include it will collapse under the weight of sanctions, that Russia is running out of weapons, when in fact there are now admissions in the New York Times and elsewhere that Russia's arms manufacturing industry is producing vast quantities of military items, far outstripping what the US is capable of doing. That Russia is isolated, that Ukraine will win. All of this is wrong, dangerously so, based on an arrogance toward the present strategic geometry and ignorance about economics. For example, we hear in the West that Bidenomics is working, that inflation is going to be stopped by raising interest rates, and so on and so forth. So for today's edition of Friday's Questions, you take up the question of what is Putin doing? What's behind his thinking? And why has the Russian economy not only survived, but appears to be thriving? Now, the next time you see some media blowhard pontificating about Putin and the demise of Russia, or some arrogant Western politician, Biden administration spokesman, think tanker, or representative of the military-industrial complex bloviating about the superiority of so-called democracy and the rules-based order, measure them against what you will hear from Putin, because you'll find that they are full of hot air. But more importantly, they're doing it for a purpose, which is to keep you in the dark so that you'll go along willingly with the looting of the world, the destruction of most of the world's economy, including our own economies in the West, without raising a peep. So before you dismiss me as a Putin apologist, realize that I'm presenting things as they actually are, which you're not getting from your mainstream media, not through the fog of war produced by NATO, or as a paid apologist or employee of a corporate cartel. So here's what Putin said and some of the analysis of his comments. At the end of the briefing, the press briefing he gave, he was asked a final question. What is the future of Russia? So in answer to this, Putin gave an explanation of what is the basis of real economic sovereignty. And I want you to listen to his words. He said, quote, "We are the makers of our future. Scientists engage in research and development. Industrialists work in the sphere of material production, agriculture, in the industrial sector, etc. Cultural figures create images to preserve our values, which shape the inner life of every person and each citizen of Russia. All of this taken together will certainly yield a result. This means that we will develop our own country and make it even stronger in cooperation with our partners and friends and in integration with the overwhelming majority of countries that represent most of the world population," unquote. That last point was a reference to the development that's occurring around the BRICS, its expansion, and the fact that more than 40 other countries wish to join the existing 11 members of the BRICS. Now, here's how my colleague David Shavin puts it in his report on what Putin said. He said, Putin rapidly encapsulated what are really the key points from Lyndon LaRouche's physical economy approach. That is, scientific ideas drive research and development. It really does start in creative human minds. David continues, the products of that R&D are realized in production, the actual transformation of nature. And artists do something similar with the inner life of mankind, something beautiful, precious, and necessary, so that among other things, the fertile ground is prepared for more scientific ideas. This latter is what Friedrich Schiller famously described as the aesthetic education of mankind, the key for preventing a great moment in history, tragically, from finding a people too little. So that was David's explanation of his view of what Putin is talking about. Now let's go back to Putin. Putin went on to say this. All of this question of research and development, of artistic creativity and so on, all of this should become embodied in our country's self-reliance, including in the areas of security and defense. But this does not mean our country will go into self-isolation. This means that we will develop our own country and make it even stronger in cooperation with our partners and friends and in integration with the overwhelming majority of countries that represent most of the world's population. I have already mentioned industry, science, and so on, he continued. But in doing so, we must, under all circumstances, preserve the soul of Russia, the soul of our multi-ethnic and multi-faith nation. This humanitarian component, along with science, education, and real production, will be the basis upon which this country will advance, while feeling and taking itself as a sovereign and fully independent state with good prospects for development. It will be this way, unquote. And that's the end of the quotes from Putin I have from Vladivostok. Now think about the implications of what he's saying. He mentioned the military component, but it's at the end of a discussion of how a nation develops its economy and its people, and in particular, increases its relative population density, which Lyndon LaRouche identified as the key component of any successful economic policy. It's not about money. It's not about compiling huge fortunes. It's about increasing the capacity of man to improve the conditions of all populations and to create the basis for true freedom. That's what Putin is discussing. Now, why is there a special military operation against Ukraine? Well, because Ukraine is being used as a weapon to stop that process in Russia. And we see in the reaction of the West to the consolidation of the BRICS after their South African summit, we see the West reacting to try to stop that process from occurring in other countries. In other words, what we're seeing is the rejection of nations unwilling to subject themselves to the phony rules of the rules-based order, which really are nothing but an excuse for a neo-colonial looting policy, and instead adopting a sound and thoughtful approach about the future, not only of their nation, but acting in mutual benefit with other nations. That's the principle of the Peace of Westphalia, which Helga Zepp-LaRouche has insisted is the only basis of sovereignty. And that's why geopolitics must end, because we cannot have a world in which nations see their goal as pitting themselves against other nations, in a zero-sum world in which our gain is someone else's loss, or someone else's gain, as in the case of China, is our loss. That's the kind of thinking which has engulfed mankind in war after war and into potential chaos. Breaking with that is crucial for the future. And that's what Putin is discussing when he talks about the soul of the nation and developing it through science, through education, through the arts. The LaRouche movement has a 50-year history of fighting for your future, based on separating the truth from self-serving bullshit put out by the corporate cartels who are committed to maintaining their power at your expense. And for a deeper appreciation of this, I would encourage you to watch my weekly dialogue with Helga Zepp-LaRouche that was done yesterday, as she takes up more questions about the present state of current history. The link to that will be in the description section of today's update. Finally, let me say that September 21st is International Peace Day. This is something that was mandated by the United Nations. There will be events all over the world, and the Schiller Institute will be very much involved in helping to shape those events around reality. You can go to our website to find out what else we're doing, schillerinstitute.com, but there will be a demonstration at the United Nations that day. I encourage you to get involved in that and to recognize that the point that Putin's making is that the truly human response at this moment in history is to act for the benefit of the other, which is actually the basis of Christianity and all legitimate world religions. So with that, I'll see you next week. Have a good weekend, and think before you speak. Hello, thanks for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our videos. Support our independence to produce videos like these. Become a member of the LaRouche organization at thelarouche.org/member. By becoming a member for $25 or more, you'll get special access to the EIR Alert Daily Briefing and Weekly Magazine, which is what I read to stay on top of things.